Hey there, friends. Jerk here. I have a bit of a different piece for y'all today. This is not something that I have developed as an exercise or a great lesson I've learned from a teacher, but rather something from my personal journal. Because of the vulnerable nature of this, I have decided to forego my typical production standards in exchange for speaking to you from my grandmother's chair in my living room. I typically read a script in my videos from a teleprompter app on my phone next to my camera so I can make some level of eye contact. But today I'll be reading directly from my journal. This is not the kind of piece I intend to do very often, but I do feel like in this circumstance, this piece will help a lot of people, or at least it has the potential to help a lot of people. And with that, here's my piece, Bad Gigs and Strong Feelings.
One of the nicest artists I've ever met with a name that doesn't quite match how nice they are. Everybody, please put your hands together for Jerk.
I had a bad gig. As I sit down to begin writing this, there is a gap between where I am now and a rational perspective. But I imagine as I work through this and process my thoughts and feelings, I'll get much closer. To be honest, I'm feeling raw. All morning I've been even considering whether or not to write this. I sometimes feel there is a very toxic piece of culture among musicians. A feeling that you can never show your hand or express your self-doubts, confusions, and insecurities. That you must move confidently and decisively to amount to anything. The more troubling thing I've noticed is that it always seems to come out. In my college days, I studied under a few folks that I would describe as bitter. My playing always felt uncomfortably personal and non-constructive. Having a fully developed brain as I write this, I realized that these folks were projecting onto me how they felt about themselves as musicians. In fact, I realize now that they were blinded by it. Not only could they not see these things in themselves, they didn't even realize that they had begun to project them onto their students. So on one hand, I'm admitting to some deeper personal insecurities and portraying the less professional side of myself as a musician, and that feels scary. On the other hand, I think being honest and vulnerable is important. I think I'll learn a lot about myself in the process of writing and sharing this, and I feel that my candor on the subject may prove valuable to someone else. I was booked to play a 30-minute solo set for a private show. I've been doing live looping sets since 2023, and that was my plan for this gig. It's the most challenging format I've attempted to date. I beatbox drum grooves, play chords and bass lines on guitar, play melodies and improvise on the saxophone, and even sing here and there. And sometimes it feels like jazz Ed Sheeran, but when I really get it right, it feels like the perfect extension of my music. It's very complex to keep organized in my head, how one layer starts and the next overlaps, the efficient movement of instruments on and off stands, the tap dancing on my pedal board to load various effects, the list really goes on. I've put a lot of effort beyond that into having a thoughtful set where each song has a different arrangement so it doesn't become monotonous over time. But what that means is that there's really no standard format for me to fall into, and I have to have sort of this like full collection of music figured out and internalized very deeply. On the Monday before the show was on a Wednesday, I was feeling all right. My pedal board was all set. I had borrowed a power supply and a pickup from two friends that helped lower the noise floor in my setup tremendously. I had my set organized and I was rehearsing it and finding success. Until the morning of the gig, this was my plan. I was going to open with a improvisation on my drone flute, go into a piece of mine called Sun Shower, where I would beatbox the drums, play chords and a bass line on my guitar, play the melody and improvise on the saxophone. Following that, I was going to do a piece of mine called Beaming, where I would create a saxophone loop by playing one-note lines until they stacked and made an entire progression, then playing a melody, and then improvising. So it would have been sort of an entire saxophone piece. Second to last was a piece of mine called Miss Silo. This was going to be very simple. I was going to loop the guitar chord progression and then play the melody and improvise over it on saxophone. This is a kind of like tender ballad type of song, so I wanted it to be kind of stripped back and intimate. Closing out the set, I had planned on a piece called Voices in My Head, where I would teach the audience the vocal part, beatbox a drum loop, play the chords and bass line on guitar, and do a singing sort of back and forth with the crowd with a guitar solo in the middle. Wednesday morning, the morning of my gig, my loop station failed. I use this. It is the TC Ditto X4, and I have been using it for a few years. I got it in 2022. In the middle of rehearsing a song, the sound cut out and the LED lights began flashing orange. After a quick Google search, I discovered it had to do with memory and it wouldn't be something I could fix quickly or reliably. Luckily, I'm a nerd and I have a lot of pedals. And in particular, I had 2 extra loop stations, both versions of the TC Flashback. I chose to use this one, the TC Flashback X4, which I've had since I was 15 years old. I am 29 now, so this is a 14-year-old pedal. And namely, it is before a certain company bought TC. I'll just say that much. So I replaced the Ditto X4 with the Flashback X4 and began running my set. The flute improvisation was fine. It didn't need the pedal for that. And Sun Shower was fine even. Once I got to beaming, however, I realized that the Flashback has a much shorter loop length than the Ditto. And because of that, I wouldn't be able to play 2 of my songs, Beaming and Miss Silo, because they just required a much longer loop length. Now, I'm sure most of you know that technical issues are a part of life for musicians. But this was when my nerves began to build up. I subbed in one of my pieces called Hum Song for Beaming, and I subbed in a cover that I was working on, Alesis by McGee, in place of Miss Silo. I wasn't really worried about Hum Song. It's very simple, and I've played it on other shows to success before. So I didn't rehearse it, and this was a mistake. Alesis, on the other hand, had me a bit nervous. I've had this desire for a while to sing and play guitar for one song in every set that I play. I think there is a ton of power to sitting down with a simple chord progression and your voice and letting the song do the rest. Nevertheless, I hadn't done this in my professional career yet and was having mixed feelings. I practiced this song no less than 15 times and even called my partner to talk through it and decide if it was a good idea. I did decide to give it a shot, and I packed up, headed to the venue, and even had a solid and issue-free load-in and sound check. I began feeling distracted during the first performance of the night, considering the transitions in my set, trying to think through certain pedal sequences, and generally just beginning to dissociate. The set ended, and I made my way to my setup, tuned my instruments, and was warming up on my drone flute. Soon after, I was on stage, being introduced and ready to play.
Now can you say hum, 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 hum.
I started with a flute improvisation, and it was going all right, but I began to notice something in the pitches feeling a bit off. Notes were leaning sharp, and eventually, I was only getting the higher overtones of the instrument. To me, this indicates that there is too much condensation inside of the flute. I hopped off mic for a split second, overblew the flute to try and clear out that condensation, and went back to playing and finished out the improvisation. I chatted with the crowd for a second and then went into my first full piece, Sun Shower. This went really well, to be honest, and the crowd really seemed to enjoy it, and it felt like the best part of my set. I chatted with the crowd for a moment and taught them how to sing the ostinato pattern in Hum Song, or at least I thought I did. I started the loop with my own humming, thought it sounded good, and grabbed my guitar to continue as planned. Now, Hum Song is in 6/4. The first 2 hums are on beats 1 and 2, and the following 3 happen on the and of beats 3, 4, and 5. So hum, 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 hum. Now, I only taught it to the crowd with 4 hums. These 4 hums with the last beat cut off imply the meter 5. So I taught the audience the hum pattern in 5, and I looped it in 5. What's worse is that I didn't realize it until I was trying to loop the guitar part, and it wasn't working. I felt I was in too deep to restart the entire song, but I was able to at least undo and re-record the first guitar loop and get it to line up pretty well and even make the melody line up in a close enough fashion. And from there, I picked up my sax to improvise, and it went, all right. The song is in A Lydian, and the saxophone is my most comfortable instrument. I got towards the end of my improvisation. My plan was to have the audience start singing the ostinato, fade out the loop, and then improvise over the audience. At first, they hung in there, but it was in 5. Who can blame them for losing it, being a kind of difficult meter and under my sort of floaty playing? So it kind of just fell apart, but people laughed and clapped and cheered. And I even made a joke about making them sing in 5 without saying it, even though it wasn't intentional. At this point, I headed into the McGee cover. I was a little shaky at first, but I deepened my breath and found some stability throughout the verses. When I got to the chorus, I just didn't feel confident, however. I didn't support the higher notes, and they came out flat. I started missing bits of the strumming pattern, and I was fully in my head and distracted. I finished, people clapped and cheered, but I told myself it was pity. This is where I irreversibly fucked up. I closed with the planned voices in my head. I taught the crowd the melody and was planning a bit of back and forth, and I set up the loop mostly fine. It was a bit slow and even had some success singing back and forth with the crowd. But once I took my guitar solo, I displaced the first line that I played by a whole fret, making it a half step lower than intended. And in a normal circumstance, I could probably make this work, but I was too in my head distracted and self-loathing in that moment. So I took what felt like a very mediocre solo and finished the song out. People clapped and said praising and encouraging things to me as I walked off stage. I believe they were all being genuine, but it didn't feel that way in the moment because I didn't believe any of the things they told me to be true about myself. I felt a mix of emotions. There was an underlying current of shame. I aimed to make great music for people that pay to see it, and I felt that I had let myself down. I was embarrassed for not rehearsing Hum Song enough prior to the actual gig. This felt like a rookie mistake. I was frustrated that in the live looping format of my set, a single pedal failure could limit my options so severely. Most of all, though, I was angry that I allowed myself to be so distracted and self-loathing while performing for an audience. I wish this were a tidy enough subject that I could offer a list of steps or tips as I do in other pieces, but it would just be reductive. I recently received a comment referring to my writing work as grounded, and I realized that my performance was just not grounded. I let too many things take my focus away from simply playing some music for people that wanted to hear music. I'm currently reading Opening the Hand of Thought by Kosho Uchiyama, and this was a passage I read the morning after my gig, so Thursday morning. There's no way we can say that our way of looking at things is absolute. If you and I are sitting together, you may think that we are both looking at the same cup in front of us, but it's not true. You look at it from your angle and from your perspective, and I view it from mine. There's no ground for saying that a fact we know or an idea we embrace is absolute. I told myself I did a bad job, so it felt like I did a bad job. There were multiple moments I had the option to take a deep breath, brush it off, and find my way back to playing a meaningful set of music, but I let myself get away and lose that grounded perspective.
Awesome. Next part. Yeah, look at you.
Listening back, it wasn't that bad. The flute intro sounded fine, just a bit frenetic. Sun Shower sounded good, and the audience really enjoyed it. Hum Song was a little bit off kilter, but it still worked. The cover was mostly there. I just clearly need more experience playing and singing in front of people. An open mic is probably a safer bet than a paying gig. Voices in my head was a bit slow and not my best solo, but it still translated fine and the audience enjoyed it. Here is what I hope is my rational perspective. My technical setup changed the day of the gig. My song choices changed dramatically the day of the gig. I didn't have as much time as I did for past gigs to prepare the new songs. I arrived to the venue nervous and distracted. I had additional technical issues during my set when my flute didn't function as planned. I let this fuel my nerves and distractedness. When I wasn't happy with something, I was cruel to myself. People in the audience clapped, cheered, and approached me afterwards to chat and say nice things. I listened back, and it didn't sound as bad as I believed it to. I have things I want to work on as a human and as a musician. Bad gigs happen, but not very often. The last one I had that had me feeling this way was in 2019. Most gigs go very well, and that's why this one felt so bad. The things I've learned from bad gigs have fueled lessons that have helped me have great gigs. Life goes on. My friend Logan, an incredible human and musician, posted this on his Instagram story the day after I played my set, and I believe that it says basically everything that I found in writing this piece. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you dearly. This was not an easy piece to make, but it was one that I felt was very important nonetheless. If you want to support my work here on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. That helps me stay relevant in the YouTube omnisphere. And personally, I would love to hear your comments about how this piece resonated with you. If you would like to dive a bit deeper, I do have a Substack where I publish text versions of these pieces that have everything linked in them if you want to find the resources. Otherwise, I will be taking next week off because I need to do my taxes. So I will see you in 2 weeks with a new video essay and a couple of exciting announcements. Until then, be well. I will see you soon. Thank you, y'all. My name's Jerk. You can find me at JerkMakesMusic. Yeah.